Pay attention to the first things that you get rid of when you're stressed. It's usually the best things for you. And when it comes to relationships and who we choose, a lot of times we are conflating high priority with high quality. I've been thinking about this concept in terms of relationship woes that a lot of people experience. And when you look a little bit deeper, there are a couple of factors that play into it. One, how we handle stress. Two, what our value system is set up as. And three, our own habits and our own disciplines. When it comes to romantic partnerships, especially in life, we are taught and told that your romantic partnership, that person will be the most important person in your life. And there's a kind of bending of the truth there because yes, they are important in the ways that they influence who you are. They influence like everything that you can think about in terms of your life choices, your financial choices, your belief system, okay? They are important in that. Are we choosing this individual because of our willingness to prioritize them or because they are a quality kind of person? And most people don't understand that. See, when it comes to romantic partnerships, there's always this willingness to abandon any and everything else to make this relationship work. We kind of appropriate it too. We make it very easy to do that, to have that mindset, to have that dynamic. Because society, no one comes before your romantic partner. And well, what happens when that relationship ends? Well, you don't have anyone to go back to. All because you were willing to say that this person is the most important person. No one else matters until further notice. But we need to understand that when we are doing that, also we need to understand why we are doing that. Does this person own the right to be the most important person in our lives, or is it a choice that we are forcing them into? And when we are talking about making this person so important, does it require us to abandon ourselves? Does it require a certain level of self-sacrifice in terms of identity just to keep this relationship? And a lot of people will be willing to lean into that idea. Like, yeah, I'm willing to give up myself to make sure I keep this relationship grounded. One of the most important things that you can understand about yourself, but also about other people, is that people are people outside of our influence. People are people outside of the labels that we give them. Okay, whether it comes to friendship, whether it comes to family, whether it comes to partner, husband, wife, etc. That is still a human that is capable of very human things. If the label is more important to you than the transaction or the relationship dynamic, then you will end up in a very emotional deficit because you made sure that this label protected people from their consequences, also enabled you to be subjected to certain consequences, all because you want to uphold this idea of what it's supposed to mean when this person has this position in your life. Think about your romantic partnerships, or like when it comes to dating, how you feel about dating. How high of a priority is it for you? And when you meet a new person, what pedestal do you put them on in comparison to the other relationships in your life, especially the healthy relationships, right? A lot of people will much rather abandon their friendships for a romantic partnership. And if you were to ask them why, a lot of the reasons that they come up with, if you really think about it, wouldn't be too far from things that you can do in your friendships. Say, well, you can't raise a family with your friend. Actually, you can. You can't make financial choices with a friend. You can. Okay? Well, your friend can't influence your religious beliefs. They probably can. You can't conceive with a friend. Yes, also true. If the only aspect of the romantic partnership that holds them to such a high degree is the sexual aspect, you are subjecting yourself, or you are putting yourself in a very dire position. And we may not always realize that. And I also want you to pay attention in your own life in terms of how you move when you are stressed. One of the things I've noticed just working with people, and just observation and just listening to people. A lot of times when people are under high stress, they get rid of the things that are the healthiest for them. So for example, if we have a very toxic romantic partnership, we will kind of isolate ourselves from any and everything else that will compromise that relationship. The reason why is because a lot of times it's easier to stay in dysfunction and it's more comfortable. And if we fear being abandoned or we fear losing this thing, well, the responsibility that we have for that, but also the desire that we have to keep it, is very high. And the things that are actually healthy that don't make us feel like we have to work for it: affection, approval, validation, or even space. we are more willing to abandon. The reason why is because, well, you don't make me work for anything. And if I have this belief system that I always have to work for things, I always have to earn everything, then this relationship doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense for my nervous system. Why? Because it's not activating me. Okay, it's not triggering me. It's not making me fear any consequences. And if there's no consequence, there's no real reward. Or if there's no risk, there's no reward. But what we fail to realize is when we are putting ourselves in that position, we are creating a space of dysfunction, also creating a certain level of distrust within ourselves. And it also puts on display our value system. I value comfort more than I value anything else. And I can be very comfortable in chaos, as I say all the time. A lot of people think that comfort means safety, and those two things are not the same. I want you to pay attention to how you handle stress. I also want you to pay attention to what place does a romantic partnership hold in your life in comparison to other things and people. I notice that a lot of times people do not really value their friendships until they need it. Right? So we treat friendship like first responders versus relationships that are a part of our lives, also influence us in a big way, our thought patterns, our value system, okay, our overall perspective and our habits, but we don't necessarily see it to that degree. This is why we are always willing to abandon those relationships for this new relationship. And sometimes this person doesn't even hold a torch to these other people in our lives. But they also get the benefits of the people who have been here, who have been doing the work with us, who have really poured into us. We get the benefits without making any effort. The only time, a lot of times, friendships will matter is when we need that support, when we need that comfort, right? So we treat friendship like an emergency room versus a community, versus our necessary relationships, versus the end goal, versus what we define as success all around. So it's really cool to take a step back and start looking at, well, what does my priority system say about me? Also, what does how I handle stress say about me? If you think about when I'm stressed out, what do I resort to? Do I resort to seeking attention? Do I resort to doom scrolling? Do I resort to binge eating? Do I resort to anything that's destructive to kind of put myself in more of a situation of self-deprecation, but also a familiar pattern of nervousness, chaos, and also confusion and disappointment. We may say we want healthier, but in terms of what we do, it may look very different, because to be healthy is very much a commitment. And it's a tough one because it requires you to be inconvenienced a lot. And I want you to think about, how often do you like being inconvenienced? And it's so funny when it comes to romantic partnership, we will change our sleep schedule to talk to a person. We will change our routine, right? A lot of things will fall off, all to keep this other individual in our lives. But I want you to realize something. There's no relationship, healthy relationship, that will require you to abandon yourself to keep it. If you find yourself abandoning all the healthier things to make this relationship work, well, that's an indicator that it's probably not the best for you. This doesn't mean that you don't compromise, right? When we have relationships, new people that come into our lives, even current relationships that we have in our life, there are certain levels of compromise. There are certain levels of inconvenience that are important to make that relationship work. And it's not necessarily the other person being demanding or feeling entitled, but it's just, well, I can sit home, I can sit on this couch all day, I can watch TV, I can do this all day and never leave the house. How does that take care of my relationships? How does that take care of me? When we say that we value ourselves, that means that we also give ourselves access to relationships that value us too. We allow ourselves to be taken care of. We allow ourselves to be built to be healthy. People that are healthy for you are not going to make you choose just them, if that makes sense. People that are really appreciative of who you are and they want to take care of you also value the other relationships that are taking care of you too. That is something that's really important to recognize. How do these people feel about the other people in my life that are healthy for me? Because yeah, sometimes you'll have people in your life who are not the best for you. And you have this other relationship that points it out, okay? Or they're like, hey, I'm not too sure about this individual. These are your relationships and I respect that, but I'm just not too sure about it. Versus somebody who may see that you have other relationships that are very fulfilling and they're bothered by that, Okay, they become a little possessive, they become controlling, they try to manipulate the situation, or they try to interfere or sabotage those other dynamics. And what do you do about that? Do you go along with it? Okay, do you make excuses for that behavior, or do you make it a point to reevaluate what that relationship is? A lot of times, if you're ran by a fear of abandonment, you will abandon your needs. You will abandon healthier relationships that meet those needs, all to make sure that a person who you can't necessarily trust to be there stays. And even when they come and go, is more on their terms than it is yours. And it's so crucial to recognize, how do I go through life? Is it about high priority or is it about high quality? Because not everything we prioritize is good for us. It just means that we chose to put this thing in a certain position. When we put those things in a certain position, how do we feel? Are we always feeling like we're running out, or do we feel actually grounded and fulfilled? What we need to understand is that there will be so many relationships before a romantic partnership. And if your only pursuit is based on what can a person do for me or how do they fulfill a certain role, then you will miss out on a lot of healthy and necessary connections, all because you desire to have this one workout. How do I handle stress? How do I handle or mishandle myself when I'm stressed? How do I handle the things that are healthy for me under stress? And what am I willing to sacrifice to make certain relationships work in my life? Who am I willing to sacrifice? Do I desire a person be something that I want them to be in my life, versus just discern who they are and what they're showing me? It's not always as complicated as we think. It's just a little bit more confusion in play because of how we are starting to delegate and how we're operating. So check in with yourself and really see how you value quality in relationships. Take care of yourselves. Truly take care of each other. All right? And also take flight.